Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome back to tonight's second half. Before we get into tonight's upload, a couple links I'd like to share. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. My merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe, click the like button, and please leave a comment. It really does help, and it does matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's second half. Shall we? Tonight's first terrifying experience. Myself and a group of friends went to the movies. The movie theater is surrounded by 4 or 5 restaurants and some other spots to get coffee and stuff. It's kind of like a mini mall, but surrounded by highway and forest. It's a mix of industrial and wooded area. There is known wildlife such as deer, rabbit in this small wooded area that's there. There's also this long sidewalk that you can walk through and a few houses about a mile from where the parking lot ends. Many people walk on this sidewalk. It is not totally secluded, but it is built on top of the dirt in the wooded area. Now that I got the description out of the way, this is what happened. On our walk back, one of my friends and I said that we should walk right into the woods, and nothing would happen. When my friend and I said we were going to run inside, they all just ignored us and walked away. My friend and I turned to face the woods and take a few leaps into the woods. And then, right before we took our last step, we both heard this low but loud growl. I wasn't sure if what I heard actually happened, so I turned to my friend, and he was looking right at me with the same confused look. We ran back to our friends, and none of them believed us. This had happened well over 10 years ago, and my girlfriend didn't believe me either. Now, I know that the obvious answer is that it could have been a feral dog or a wolf. My concern is that there are no wild dog in the area. As far as wolves go, the wooded area is rather large, but I do not believe big enough to house wolves, especially since there are so many people and cars in the surrounding area. We both turned to look and see if anything moved, but the grass did not seem to move like it normally did when a rabbit would hop around. Tonight's second terrifying experience. This happened to my mom and my 17-year-old sister last October. I'd been talking to my mom, and she had brought this up, asking me what it could be. I was at a loss. My mom lives in the country in the Midwest, where the nearest neighbor is nearly a mile away. They're surrounded by cornfields, and most of the roads that they drive are surrounded by fields as well. They're driving home from doing some shopping at around 11 p.m., my mom driving, my sister in the front seat. They were on a gravel road about 3 miles from the house, surrounded by fields. All of a sudden, something black jumped/flew across the street and the front end of their car. She said that it was so close to the windshield that if she had not braked, she was sure she would have hit it. She described it as all black, stretching to nearly the full width of the road. The roads out there are just big enough to allow 2 vehicles to pass each other if they drive with their outer tire barely touching the edge of the gravel. It was all black. It kind of flew across the road from one cornfield to the other. However, the arc seemed like it had been running at a high rate of speed and jumped right as it was exiting the corn on one side, then landed after going through the corn on the other side. I asked her if it looked like a bird or a wolf. She said it was not a bird. A wolf would be a closer explanation. But there are no wolves around here. She's never seen nor heard of a wolf that big either. She said after it jumped across, they stopped in the middle of the road. She asked my sister if she had saw it as well, and she confirmed that she saw the same thing. They were both freaked out, but my sister said she had felt a shiver go up her spine and got goosebumps immediately. On another note, in the last year or so, people had been finding deer, torn rabbits, coons, as well as a neighbor's goat. Edit/update spoke with my mom again, and I misheard her. She said she believed it was mid to late October. She said that it didn't have super long legs from what she could see, at least not long enough to easily step over the car. It was black from what she could see, but definitely not a deer. It was much too large, and the width of it was thinner than what you would see on a jumping deer. She said it almost looked like a wolf with kind of short hair. My sister thinks it may be some sort of lycanthrope, but it doesn't seem to fit the behavior or look from what they've described to me, although my sister said it didn't have much hair. It was patchy. Today's third experience. This is an experience of something strange that happened to myself and two of my friends one summer in the early 2000s. It happened in a town that I grew up in, with one of my friends being a lifelong friend from childhood and the other a college friend of his. We had gone off to different schools, and being home for the summer, we were just having fun, partying and whatnot. This particular night, I got together with my friend James, I'll call him, and his college friend Mark. It was a hot night, and we decided to jump the fence at our local pool and go swimming. We have done this for a dozen times before, and have never had any trouble, and only ever needed to keep an eye out for the local cops. We got there, hopped the fence, stargazed on top of these canopies, and then went swimming. We were not loud, as we didn't want to attract any attention if any cops came through looking for kids doing the exact same thing we were doing. About an hour into being there, all of us were in the pool. We heard this low grumble from the woods that surrounded the pool grounds on three sides. It rose quickly in intensity and volume, with a rapid Doppler effect moving towards us from deep in the woods. It sounded horrible, like a pack of very angry dogs or wolves or something, all roaring, ever louder, like talking over one another. We all froze at the beginning of it, just stared at the woods, at the direction that it was coming from. It came so fast, charging to the tree line and chain-link fence that surrounds the pool grounds. I had never been so frightened in my life. The thing I remember clearly was that there were no sounds of footfalls. Whatever it was, it moved through the woods at a rapid speed with no discernible thumps of branches being crushed underfoot or branches breaking or anything else being moved. The awful roaring reached a crescendo just as it broke the tree line and got to the fence. Or so our ears told us, because we could not see anything. We all remained frozen in the pool, just staring, waiting for our deaths. I really don't know how long we stayed motionless for in the pool, staring, but the sound stopped abruptly when it got to the edge of the grounds. It was such an awful, heart-chilling sound that it made our blood run cold on a hot summer night. After God knows how long, we all snapped out of there and got to the pool's edge, hauled ourselves out, grabbed our clothes, and ran, dripping wet, jumped the fence, and took off. Now, the thing is we're in the suburbs, so about 20 minutes outside of New York City. There are no bears, no wolves, and I've never seen a dog without a master, much less a pack of wild dog. This was one of the most frightening moments of my life, and I have no idea what this was. I actually completely forgot about the incident until a few years ago when my friend James brought it up and the entire thing came flooding back all at once. The only thing I can compare the sound to is this one Bigfoot documentary I saw, and a man who said he heard one mimicked the sound he had heard. That was the closest I've ever heard. Being that this is the suburbs outside of a very densely packed city, and knowing the size of the woods, I find it nearly impossible for it to be a Sasquatch. These woods are not large at all, maybe a few square miles, and the other side of the woods are then bordered by businesses, schools, and homes. So, I don't really know what that was after all of this time. I asked my friend about it, again 2 Christmases ago, and he said that he thought it was aliens. I've not spoken to our friend Mark, as he was more of my friend's friend, but I'm now curious to see what he thinks after all of this. Today's 4th experience. I live in the mountains of western North Carolina, about 30 minutes from the Eastern Cherokee Indian Reservation. My home is a sleepy little town, and not much happens there. As for me, I am a 36-year-old white male with about 1/16 Cherokee heritage. The rest is your typical Irish-English heritage common in western North Carolina. Okay, to the point. Early this year, in the spring, I felt drawn to look up spooky stuff, just everything, from government conspiracies to ghosts, witches, etc. But living deep in the mountains, I've always had a fascination with werewolves. They scare the stuffing out of me. I know they aren't possible, I hope, but I was tired of the endless European werewolf legend. I needed something now. So I Googled North American werewolves. The legend of skinwalkers and Dogman was what came up. For those who don't know, skinwalkers, Navajo, ye Nadalushi, which means with it he goes on all fours, are a Navajo, Southwest Native American Indian witch. These beings are bad news. To become one, you have to murder a loved one. They are known for having power to shapeshift in all legends, particularly into coyotes or wolves. So I've been researching these things for a few weeks now. I would Google something about them as I left work at 2300 and let my smartphone load up a web page and onto my hour ride. I would then proceed to read the web page in my driveway before I went into the house. It's something I always do. Well, one night I had to work over until about 02:30. I loaded up a page about them and headed home. Uneventful ride home, no full moon or anything like that. I pulled into my driveway around 03:15. Kill the lights and engine. I pull out my smartphone and I begin to read. I felt odd that night, like I was being watched, but I live on a fairly well-lit street and I could see and hear nothing out of the ordinary. Even the smell in the air was normal, but something was off. It wasn't the website either. It was basically a recount of other websites, nothing new. So I texted my fiance, my normal I'm home message, grabbed my smokes and opened the door. That's when it happened. As I shut the door, there was a howl and a snarl behind me. I turned and saw a black shape in the yard, low and on all fours, approximately 20 yards away. My mind was racing for me. What do I do? I could try to sprint to the house or get back to the car. I jumped back in my car and slammed the door, locking it, and turned it on. I couldn't see anything around the vehicle, but I could hear the growling at the back of the car. My terror turned into rage. How dare this thing threaten me? I threw the car in reverse and floored it. I thought I might hit something, and as I turned around, I thought I saw something sprinting off into the woods behind my neighbor's house. Across the street now, my fear came rushing back in spades. I looked at the clock, and I could no longer stand to be at my house at all. I had to be anywhere, somewhere other than here, so I took off, leaving my house at 03:30. I went to my local Walmart parking lot at 04:30. I don't remember the past hour. I do know how far I had gone, but my gas was getting low. I still could not bring myself to go home. I ended up sitting in that parking lot until 0700. I drove myself home and nervously crawled into bed. Not much else has happened since then, aside from seeing one coyote. Well, they aren't uncommon to North Carolina. I mentioned it because I was driving to work at 0500. I'm on day shift. And I was laughing at myself for being such a chicken this summer, and how foolish I had acted. At worst, there was a coyote in my yard, and it was as scared of me as I was it. I thought to myself, there is no such thing as dogmen or skinwalkers. At that very second, a coyote bounded across the highway ahead of me. Its eyes glowed an eerie yellowish red in my headlights. It stared directly into my eyes for what felt like a solid minute, even though I was going 60. It could have been maybe 3 seconds top, and then bounced across the highway into the forest. Was this just an odd coincidence or a warning? I'm not going to discount that. It was just some random chance having a laugh at my expense. And I think a lot of stuff people believe in is BS, but this one just hit home. Today's fifth terrifying experience includes 2 maps. When I was younger, I moved to Alaska just to see what it was like. Myself, along with some others, flew out to a bush village called Port Graham to do some aid work. You can only fly or boat to Port Graham because it is remote. It was dead winter, easily, -20 without the wind chill. We landed, we were greeted by the village chief, and he, in a very matter-of-fact way, warned us of 3 things. Do not go to the dump alone because they had seen ghosts there. If you see the little people, don't follow them into the woods. Watch out for Bigfoot. Now, I'm a spiritual person. I had no doubt that they had been seeing ghosts and the spirits they call the little people. But I've been to 44 states and 11 countries. I've been stalked by mountain lion, and I've come face to face with a bear. I've spent weeks on end in the Rockies, Cascades, Olympia, Appalachians, Yukon, but I've never seen a Bigfoot. So, when we weren't working, we stayed in a newly constructed building that was to eventually be an old folks' home for the village. They called it the Elders' Home. One night I walked from there to the community building where a church meeting was being held. Even though the road butted against the woods, which were right next to the mountain, I wasn't worried about bear because they were in hibernation. We heard no wolves while we were there either. As I was walking down the road, I began to hear what I thought was an echo of my footsteps. I stopped once, and they stopped as well, so I didn't think much of it until I began walking again, and the footsteps echoed, seemed to delay. Not just delay, but in front of me. Okay, this is weird, I thought, but I chalked it up to a shape of the hills making weird echo. I kept walking to the building, but the closer I got to the echo, it seemed to speed up. Whatever was making the sound, I realized, was definitely ahead of me and was bipedal. To make matters slightly creepier, the civic building had motion-activated security lights on it. I walked there every night, and I knew how far I had to be for the lights to come on. As I got close to the lights facing the woods came on, but I knew I was too far to trip them, and they were facing away from the road I was on. At that point, I was debating turning around and walking the dark road back to the Elders' home, or running as fast as I could for the civic building, until I heard whatever was in the woods start running away from the civic building. So I hightailed it to the civic building. I ran inside, sat down. No one talked to me for some reason. I just sat there trying to process what could have been running around in 2 legs in the dead of an Alaskan winter. And no damn way was it Bigfoot. No way. About 10 minutes later, I heard a 4-wheeler come tearing up the road and skid to a halt outside. 2 teenage girls from the village came running, crying hysterically. It was hard trying to make sentences from the sobbing, but what we pieced was they had been chased. The road from the village to the civic building cuts into the woods, and there are not any lights until it goes around a corner and comes out near the civic building, where the security lights turn on. Map for reference, drawn from memory. Second, better map. They said that when they came around the corner, a Bigfoot had jumped out behind them and began chasing them. It only stopped when they got into the lights. I just remember sitting there thinking, oh my God, I have to walk back alone tonight. Obviously, I made it, and I believe in Bigfoot now. Tonight's final encounter. A while back, my boyfriend and I went camping in eastern Germany. We had found an incredible spot to set up our tent by a river in the woods. We parked our car about 20 meters away from us behind a bush. After setting everything up, we sat by the river and enjoyed the sunset. It was getting darker, and we could hear the animals around us getting more active. We were well aware that we would hear creepy noises at night. Anyway, my boyfriend decided to bring our food to the car to not attract any animals at night. I stayed at our spot, enjoying the view. As soon as he walked to the car, this strange feeling got to me, a feeling of fear and alertness. I kept checking on my boyfriend, who jokingly said, shaking my head, "Please keep looking after me," which is also typical for him. Maybe it's worth mentioning that neither he nor I are easily scared. We are both tough and had a knife with us. When he got back to our spot, he knelt down right next to me and said, "I heard something really heavy walking in the woods." I thought he was joking, trying to scare me, but he was serious, and I could see how uneasy he was. He said that we should have a look with the knife and flashlights, so we did. About halfway to the car, I could hear it as well. Some very heavy footsteps. First, I thought, oh well, a deer, but not soon after, I had noticed that it clearly sounded like it was bipedal. At that moment, I got chills, and I felt an insane moment of panic. We stood there frozen, staring into the woods. When we moved, it moved. When we stood still, it stood still. It clearly was mocking our steps. That went on for a couple of minutes. We had enough. We rushed back to the tent as my boyfriend stood guard with the knife on hold. I grabbed everything valuable and necessary, and we rushed to the car. As I grabbed the stuff, I could still hear it moving through the brush. As soon as we were in the car, we locked the doors and drove off to gain some distance. We parked the car in a parking lot and talked about what had just happened. My boyfriend said that when he brought the food to the car, he had already had a weird gut feeling of something lurking. The reason for him asking me to keep checking on him. As soon as he heard the steps, he said he literally got chills down his spine. He also saw some sort of vague outline of something, but could not identify it. He's never felt more alerted and panicked in his whole life. Neither did I. It was pure survival and gut instincts to get away from whatever that was in the bush. We ended up sleeping in the car that night. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed today's second half. I thought it was pretty cool with those maps of the Port Graham. Definitely interesting. Definitely a creepy story though. I've always wanted to go to Alaska. It's probably the one state I will probably never get to, but maybe someday. I don't know. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. With that, please stay safe. Thanks for the support. And, well, we'll see you again tomorrow morning.